to remember some of it. And this is actually what, if you think about it, what prolongs our life. When, when we look back at the years, at the past year, so what do we remember? We don't remember, the week. What did you do on the 26th of March, 19 or 99, for example, or whenever? What we do remember is something different, something that the days that brought us new impressions. And what are the better ways than bringing you new impressions than travels? So, funnily enough, think about it. If you look back at your life, you remember most of your travels. You remember most of your places where you've been. Whereas, the so-called routine at home, work, and so on, they just goes unnoticed. And when you look back and you have lots of memories, your life appears longer. So that's a very simple trick. So, well, traveling and thinking about your travels and writing about your travels is one of the surest ways of prolonging your life. And we'll do some time traveling with you probably in the last seminar. I promise that. So I'll try to teach you how to be a time traveler. I've been doing it for many years, and uh, I quite enjoy it as well. It's actually quite easy. Um, anyway. Uh, Travel writing. Uh, and what is it? Uh, frankly, I don't know. I don't think a literary genre like this actually exists. I think it was actually invented in this country, which in general publishes too many book titles, 5 times as many book titles than the USA, appear every year. So being a writer here is, well, a very difficult plight, I can tell you. And probably just to separate, this bunch of writers from the others, the publishers and booksellers and literary agents invented this term, travel writing. Well, in America, you mostly find what we call travel literature and the travel memoirs. In some other countries, there is no such genre whatsoever. And I think, well, there is some sense in it. What is travel writing? You're either a writer or you're not a writer. You can travel sometimes, like, for example, was Chekhov a travel writer? Mark Twain, with his amazing books about Europe, first package tours to Europe. Chekhov with his trip to the island of Sakhalin. Uh, uh, Almost, Dickens, yeah, of course, Dickens, went to America, went to France, wrote beautiful books, particularly about France. I'm just actually reading this book now. So were they travel writers? I don't think so. They were writers first and foremost. And that sometimes they needed to travel to get new impressions, to prolong their lives probably as well. Uh, so this is what it is. So you have to be a writer, first of all. And whether you travel or not, it depends on what you really want to do at the given moment. Uh, what uh, so what does it mean being a writer? Being a writer means, first of all, uh, well, being an interesting person. And uh, I have to say that because you have to be able to share bits of your thinking, of your internal world, that are interesting, that are appealing. Uh, some people are trying to use travel as kind of a gimmick to make themselves more interesting. I mean, at my travel writing seminars, well, often people come up to me and say, look, I want to, I say, what do you want to write about? I want to write about my holidays, for example. They quite often say, they say, why do you want to write about your holidays? Do you think, the world needs another book about someone's holidays? Was there anything special about it? Well, they say, no, not really, nothing special, but I'd like to go there again for free and get some freebies and get nice flights and so on and so forth. So unfortunately, that's why travel writing becomes so popular, and that's why in the eyes of so many people, it is a kind of an easy way to survive, an easy way, uh, well, to get some freebies and so on and so forth. Nothing can be further from truth. I think this perverse attitude has something to do with the extreme popularity of books by my good friend Bill Bryson, because they read so easily, they're funny, and they used to inspire me. Many years ago when I lived in Australia, I was dreaming of becoming a travel writer myself. Uh, well, I met Bill Bryson in Melbourne about 30 years ago, and then we met in many places, in many other places in Tasmania, and I actually even visited him in Hanover, where he used to live in the United States before moving here. And he was a very kind, modest, and kind of accessible man until he became very famous. So when he became less accessible, but he would always say, basically, his travel writing, he was doing it just basically for fun because he was a professional editor. He worked at the Times newspaper for many years. He wrote a brilliant book about the English language and well, basically the American language and the differences between the two, and the manual for the editors. So he was extremely, he still is, intelligent literary person, and he decided to kind of put down his impression of his travels, and he was himself very surprised, but they resound in success. But that is, with which this books read. It led to appearance of a new genre, which one literary critic called cheerful ledism. So there are quite a lot of young men and young women bumbling along the world, and taking the Mickey out of everything they see, basically, then putting it together and pretending that kind of travel writers or writers. Some of these books actually sell quite well. When they cannot really see enough, these people, they bring some props with them, like a fridge, for example, or I don't know, Einstein's brain, or like a pig. They're all real books. People travel to these things because they don't have enough kind of wit, enough brains, enough power in their eyes to see interesting things. So they have to bring the props with them, the cliches. It makes their task easier. So of course, all these books, even though some of them sell quite well, as I said, they have nothing to do with literature. And travel writing is like any other writing, is literature first and foremost. Uh, when people ask me what are the main qualities of becoming a travel writer, and I'll come to it a little bit later to what is required. It's basically, I think there are two. The first one is having no sense of direction whatsoever. uh, because when you get lost, seriously lost, in a dangerous place, especially, then your eyes open up and you start seeing things, you start remembering things. It's all about observing, it's all about remembering, it's all about seeing some interesting details in the places and in the people, that we think we all know. So when you get lost, seriously lost, you can try. It does really. You do open your eyes and you become if not a travel writer, then definitely a traveler. And secondly, if you want someone to become a traveler or a travel writer, log him up. That's what I'm saying. Just log him up, because traveling as such, and I can tell you as an expert, traveling as such is a product of the inherent sense of contradiction, embedded in our soul. Uh, Someone who's been kind of put in prison for some time, you let him out, and he would have this irrepressible urge to travel, almost unstoppable. I'm talking about myself here. I first, believe it or not, crossed the border of the Soviet Union, the world's biggest cage, at the tender age of 34, 34 years. Yeah. Until then, I haven't been out of the USSR. I traveled as a journalist all over the huge country, 1/6 of the world's territory. But I don't think the size of the cage matters really. I mean, it can be the biggest cage in the world. It can be 1/6 of the world territory, but it's still a cage because it's, there are some kind of uncles at the borders, with the submachine guns, who tell you, no, you cannot go past this point because I say so, basically. So you feel imprisoned nevertheless. But I did fly, of course, all over the place as a journalist special correspondent of Crocodile magazine. I went many times, for example, to the Far East, and you fly for 12 hours from Moscow. Can you imagine where you will be if you fly for 10 hours? You'll be halfway to Australia, basically, if you fly from London. But there you're just in the same place, basically. Same paper, same queues in the shops, same drab faces. So basically, it didn't really feel very much like traveling. But I always had a secret since I was a little boy. I was reading train timetables. I was looking at the maps, especially when I was kind of feeling unwell, and I wanted to feel unwell quite often because of that, not to go to school, but to sit at home and to look at my maps. And that armchair traveling was extremely rewarding to me. I really loved it, and I still do, despite the fact that I can go almost anywhere now. So again, this is this repressed desire to move around, to travel. That's That's another, I think, essential quality to become a travel writer or a travel journalist. Well, travel journalism here probably describes it better because, well, I don't mean guidebooks, because guidebook writing is totally different. It's not an art. It's maybe a craft, Well, a good craft, but still nothing to do with creativity. I would actually, as one of my colleagues once suggested, uh, collect all travel books, modern travel books, in one big pile and set them on fire, because, or use them as the guide to the places where you shouldn't go. Yeah, because here I come to something very important that I want you to remember. Uh, One of the most beautiful things ever said uh, belongs to a Chinese writer, Ling Yutang. And I didn't pick this quote out of dictionary of quotations. I read several books by this amazing writer who wrote in both Chinese and English and lived actually in America for quite a long time. He was also an inventor. He invented a typewriter with Chinese characters. Can you believe it? And which is still used. It's not an easy thing to do. So, and that amazing man, he said the following thing: a good traveler is one who does not know where he is going to, and the perfect traveler does not know where he came from. So when I first saw this sentence, I just thought it doesn't make any sense to me. Why is it that a good traveler doesn't know where he is going to? Why is the perfect traveler unaware of where he comes from? But you know what? And I was just in the beginning of my travel writing career, so to speak, inspired by Bill. I was researching my book on the smallest countries of Europe, Littlest Delight, and gradually it started dawning on me, and I was questioning my poor kids, much later in the car, when we were driving across France or Italy, and I said, so why do you think, a good traveler doesn't know where he is going to? Well, this is pretty clear, I think, because I just mentioned the guidebooks that sap all the joy of discovery out of traveling. So in a way, when you go in the direction or in the place you don't know to, when your mind is kind of clean, and empty and open, so then you observe, and everything is unexpected. That I said in one of my books that a travel writer must be a director of first impressions. There is such a position in real estate in Australia, director of first impressions. First impressions are extremely important, and people say sometimes they're misleading, but I think they're all very important and powerful. So basically, if you don't know where you're going to, you look around, you observe, you get lost, as I said already. Like I once, walking in Liechtenstein, I got lost without knowing it and ended up in Austria, and I will never forget that. Uh, because I only realized I was in Austria where I wandered into a little pub in a village. I thought I was in Liechtenstein, and I saw everyone there gobbling up Viennese schnitzels, larger than Liechtenstein. Some of them were, on the plates. But even then, I kind of said, oh, that's strange. But then when I was asked to pay in Austrian shillings, it was before the euro, I realized I was actually, I crossed the border without realizing it. Then I was kind of fresh from the Soviet Union after my defection, so I got quite frightened and started running towards the border along the highway. And with relief, I saw that the border post was empty, and there were just some photos of terrorists inside and no one else. And I just checked them against, whether my photo was not there yet. And so, having made sure it wasn't, I just happily raced across the border. And I'll never forget that. So it's basically not knowing when you are going to. But the second one is much more complicated. Why is the perfect traveler? Why is the perfect traveler? Is the traveler who doesn't know where he comes from. And I don't think I will ever become a perfect traveler, unfortunately, because the luggage of my past is not it's only very important to me, but it's kind of pressing on me quite a lot. I mean, I think I was very lucky. I had an amazing life in two different, not just countries, cultures, languages, but social systems, and I managed to work and be reasonably successful in each. So obviously, I'm kind of entitled and probably even intended to compare, to tell other people what it is like, not because being so special, but because I was lucky, as I repeated. But the perfect traveler should try and get rid of it. He or she should try and get rid of the luggage of the past completely, to make his mind again open to new impressions as they are, not to be marred by, oh, I think I've seen that, just like, in Chernobyl, I've seen something worse, or wherever, So that's not, well, don't misunderstand me. The luggage should be carried with you, yeah? But it shouldn't be kind of brought into the picture constantly, You should try and see things through the prism of your past, but without actually returning the constantly. So this is an extremely important quality of a travel writer. And the best travel writers, like for example, Patrick Leferman, who wrote probably some of the best travel books in history, recalling his travels, his walk across Europe 50 years since he actually did the walk, So that's actually quite an achievement, because you cannot do a book like that if you well, because he had no when he was writing this book, obviously 50 years of life experience, they didn't dominate him at all. They didn't mar his perception. So the books still read as if they were written yesterday. So basically these two things, and well, there are of course some other little rules and of travel writing to which I'm going to come back a bit later. But now let's come straight to uh, the competition bit. Uh, and the competition and my publishers have kind of generously agreed to donate the whole book, one book, either a printed copy, actually in England or in the United States, or well, a Kindle copy, electronic copy, if you for some reason, they can't do it outside these territories. So it's kind of going to be a fairly simple thing, simple and not. How do we start? How do we start and where do we start? First of all, we've decided, we've got something interesting to say, some kind of interesting travels that we want to share with other people. So where do we start? Well, the worst way to start is, well, a good travel story is chronological, especially on a train or on a plane. When I worked in the Daily Telegraph travel section, we would cross these beginnings out because they don't tell anything to the reader, who knows already that you are traveling and he doesn't really care how you travel and what means of transport do you take. So my favorite way of starting a story, not just a travel story, it's an ancient literary device called in media res. Yeah. So basically what it means, it's a plunge into the narrative. You start not from the beginning, but from the middle of the story. Or if not from the middle, then with something intriguing, that kind of sucks the reader straight into the story. Well, there is such an example. I don't know who penned it. When he woke up, the dinosaur was no longer there. I think it's classic. This is a brilliant beginning, especially for a travel story. And of course, we all heard we probably didn't actually hear who penned this sentence. It was on Dark and Stormy Night, which is used as a kind of as a cliche of the first sentence. It's actually an excellent first sentence, and it belongs to the guy who used to be our neighbor here in Hertfordshire, where I'm talking from, Edward Bulwer Lytton, who lived in the town called Nebworth, about 10 miles away from here. He was a very prolific writer, in Victorian writer, basically 19th century. He was more prolific than even Dickens. And a very, very good writer, very kind of undeservedly, probably forgotten. He wrote dozens, if not hundreds, of novels and stories and so on, and was better known for very extremely bad marriage, that he had bad relationship with his wife for some reason. Well, I know about him so well because I made him into one of the characters in my fiction book, fantasy called Granny Yaga. So he actually He's a character in that story and even has an affair with Baba Yaga, you know, believe it or not. But anyway, that's a totally different story. He wrote this sentence. Uh, it was a dark and stormy night, and you know, it kind of gently takes you into the narrative. Well, there are some other well-known and nice ways of starting a story. I'll just give you just a couple of very quick examples, and then I will ask you to think of an opening sentence for a story. Well, as I said, avoid sentences like the train was approaching Moscow, or I fastened my seatbelt in preparation for landing. They're absolutely useless. They don't actually mean anything. They don't tell the reader anything. On the other hand, my boat overturned in the middle of the river is a very good example of taking a plunge in more than one sense. Well, to quote some of my stories, I have to do it sometimes, not well, because I think I kind of somewhere succeed, somewhere I don't, but there's nothing wrong with that. A story on my time in Mount Essos in Greece, this amazing monastic republic, all-male republic of Orthodox monks. The mountains, the beautiful scenery, unbelievable history. The mountain pass was steep and narrow, strewn with rough, shapeless rocks and mule droppings. It wound mercilessly uphill along the edge of an abyss, and it seemed endless, and so on.
Sorry, Vital, I'll just pause you for 1 second. Just for
Yeah,
everybody else here. So the competition is now on. Whilst Vitali is continuing, you can open the chat window here. I've put a link in there. This is a link to a document which we can all edit at the same time. You can just open it without logging in, pick a available slot that hasn't been filled in yet, and please write your opening sentence into that slot. And you can mark it with your name or just stay until the end of the webinar when Vitaly will pick the best opening line.
yes, sorry, yeah, sorry for that. So basically, Dmitry has explained it. Try and come up with an opening sentence, just one sentence for a travel story or for any story, you know. Like, for example, there are some great beginnings, you know, to uh, famous novels and even short stories, you know, it helps, you know. Well, another example, uh, this is from my feature, which is in the book as well, a telegraph feature on the Russian old believers in Alaska, uh, uh, which I also, Alaska is one of my favorite places in the world. And because it's so American as well, I call it a kind of shopping mall of beauty. It's really amazingly beautiful. Um, she was sitting on the pavement, or as they say in America, sidewalk, next to a pause for coffee shop for dogs in a windswept suburb of Anchorage, Alaska's biggest city. Her slanting and opaque eyes stared straight in front of her across the buzzing freeway and further past the McDonald's outlet and the gray modernistic bungalow of an Alaska cremation center into nowhere. She was drunk or stoned, or most likely both. Alcoholism and drug addiction are still rife among Alaska's natives. So basically, there's quite a lot of information already in this opening sentence about Alaska, about its history, and about everything. And then the reader hopefully gets hooked on something like that. Another great one belongs to my late friend, unfortunately, Joseph Heller, you know, the writer whom I was lucky to know quite well, the author of Catch-22. And his autobiographical novel, Now and Then, you know, he opens it like that. He describes Coney Island, basically, where he was born, you know, this strange kind of amusement park, American amusement park. The golden stripe around the carousel was made of brass. You know, I think it's a brilliant sentence. The golden stripe made of brass. So that's the example of in medias res, and I want you to try yourself in it and see what happens. And I think already something started coming already. Excellent, excellent. So now, and unless you want to have a short break, we carry on, yeah? What
Yeah,
does meet?
Vitaly, we'll carry on, Vitaly. But
Okay.
just to let everyone know that the results will be they'll judged at the end of the at the end of the webinar today by yourself, and we'll announce who the prize winner is. So very exciting. There's some funny ones coming in. Okay, Vitaly, so if you want to continue.
Yeah, sure. So basically, yes, carrying on. Travel writing, if it exists at all, again, I have to say that, is one of the hardest, probably, literary genres, because if you kind of imagine a metaphorical road, yeah, so and there's quite a lot to find on that road, yeah, the unknown road, you're going into the unknown, but there's even more to lose on it. And again, I'm speaking from my own experience. It so happened that, you know, after my imprisonment for many years, for enforced imprisonment in the cage of the USSR, I made myself free. Well, which was also, well, Dmitry remembers it. It was not an easy thing to do, but because we still were I was under this Article 64, failure to return, it was called, you know, in the criminal code of the USSR. So you go, for example, traveling from England to France, you forgot to ask the authorities. So, and then in France, or when you come back to England, they arrest you and put you in front of a firing squad for failure to return here. So that's kind of, this Article 64 existed. But, well, I had to do it because after my investigative journalism, you know, and kind of I stirred up quite a lot of very kind of powerful power nests, you know, and quite a lot of stuff. It's a different story, so I had no choice, and I had to take my family out, and I did successfully. I ended up in Australia almost immediately after half a year, 6 months in England. And in Australia, I started feeling extremely claustrophobic after a year, despite the fact that materialistically and materially I was not very successful there. Because just for the same reason the Soviet Union, they also had it's a beautiful, lovely country, but it was also kind of separated from the rest of the world by a kind of a Berlin Wall made of dollars in this time. And this time, and basically this wall made of dollars is in many ways much more impregnable, if you think about it, than the wall made of political dogmas, as it was the case in the USSR. And it was proved later when Berlin Wall was demolished, and now there is nothing there, you know, but the dollars wall is still there, you know. And so anyway, I came back to Europe on the advice of my other late friend. Gosh, I mean, that's what the age, you know, means. Many of my friends, you know, are no longer with us. So Peter Ustinov, you know, whom I met in Australia, and several kind of meetings later, he actually advised me to come back to Europe, and I did. So I came back to Europe, and then something strange started happening. I became an obsessive traveler for quite a number of years. Because imagine, I was like the depressed spring, you know, for so many years. And the thing with the spring is if you depress it for long enough and hard enough, and then release it, you know, it starts going, you know, in all directions here and there. And the harder you pressed it, and mine was pressed pretty hard, I can tell you, still feel it sometimes, the after effects of that. So the more kind of hectic and unruly it becomes, you know, so this way and that way. So I basically lost almost everything I had, personally, well, in every way, basically. After 10 years of this kind of uncontrolled travels, I probably became a slightly better writer, you know, but that was kind of the only gain that I found. All the rest was lost, and that's what, you know, every aspiring travel writer should be prepared for. And when people ask me again at the seminar, so what do I do to improve my writing skills? I said, forget about writing, you know. The main thing is to live like a writer, you know. Your life will reflect itself, you know, when the time comes. Forget about putting words on paper. Just go and live a life, travel, you know. Get divorced or whatever, I don't know. Just it's still probably a very East European concept, you know. Tolstoy said that the writer must suffer. I don't believe in it anymore. The writer should not really suffer more than other people. I mean, being interested in Buddhism now, I know that all our life is suffering of a kind, but instead of suffering, Tolstoy himself, by the way, he didn't really suffer that much until the very end of his days. Instead of suffering, the writer needs constant titillation, constant new impressions, and then, well, basically, if he can write, if he or she can write, it will happen. So I basically say, go and travel for 5 years, or go and kind of break up with your girlfriend or boyfriend and suffer a little bit, sleep rough, No, that's a bit too extreme. But these are the most important qualities. And many people, when they hear that, they just say, oh, well, that's not for me. Then, oh, well, that's fine, because writing is probably one of the hardest professions you can imagine in terms of rewards as well. The average income of a British writer, I think it's £5,000 a year. Just think about that. And that's the average. Not talking about J.K. Rowling. So I already mentioned the importance of getting lost. Yeah, so imagine that despite all of this, you still decided to persevere, getting lost seriously, my kids, for example, my family and friends, they know that I'm really lucky again here. I'm totally devoid of any sense of direction whatsoever, to the point that I almost have a sense of direction, but a totally wrong one, a negative kind of sense of direction, because I always go in the wrong direction, which led me to being completely and irretrievably lost, not only in Liechtenstein, which is one of the world's smallest states, of course, but also in places like Sark, for example, even kind of a smaller state on a very small island, or even a tiny island on the Great Coral Reef in Australia, which has got a little resort, maybe about 100 square meters or whatever, where I got completely lost after dark and couldn't find my tent, so I had to scream and wake up, some other people, who worked at the resort. It's very embarrassing, but, God, I will never forget that. It was scary. So your emotions switch on, and you become very much attuned to whatever is happening around you. The other thing, of course, very important thing is the style. And well, Tyro travel writers, so those or beginners, let's say, they tend to use too many adjectives. This is actually one of the most common boo-boos, travel writers make. They send that the more adjectives you put in a sentence or to a poor noun, noun is already kind of suffocating, breathing heavily, and the burden of these adjectives. No, they still more and more and more. The church was beautiful and stunning and amazing and so on. And most of these adjectives don't mean anything for the reader, because beauty and ugliness actually is in the eyes of the beholder. So if you say the church is beautiful, well, it means what do you think is beautiful? You may think that St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow is beautiful, yeah. Whereas in fact, other people think that it's an architectural mess, completely hectic. But so it's all very kind of individual tastes differ. So how do you describe them? And this is very important, because if you cannot describe, you cannot write, basically. Jerome K. Jerome, such a great English British writer, which again is he was for some reason much more popular in Russia than he is in Britain. He was an extremely good stylist, by the way. And in one of his books, Three Men and a Bummel, he actually said the descriptions never work in literature. Well, he gives a couple of very funny examples. So how can you describe? My answer is describe via interaction of a place or an object you want to describe with yourself. Again, come back to this poor little church. So this little church in the kind of distance was very beautiful. No, this doesn't work. But the church, and I can now see that very church, which I think probably I could observe while lost in the same Liechtenstein and looking down the valley. There was a little church there which was so graceful and fragile that you felt like putting it on the palm of your hand and taking it home to London with you. And here suddenly the church comes to life. yeah, the church comes to life and starts having some kind of meaning, and yeah, the reader can see it very clearly. Or, for example, you can say the window of my hotel room was facing the beach or facing the sea, and so on. So what does it mean? Doesn't really mean much at all, because uh, it's kind of a dead picture. That sea, well, the sea is silent, so the whole picture is completely kind of uh, shut down. I would say, like shops now in high streets in most of our towns, unfortunately. But if you say that I was falling asleep to the gentle murmurs of the surf behind the windows of my hotel room. This is different. This is suddenly they imagine you trying to fall asleep, and suddenly the sea starts whispering something, starts saying, comes to life, and so on. Um, the other thing is a very important thing is getting your reference points right. Yeah, because if you say, for example, I woke up at 6 o'clock a.m., again, how the hell did you know it was 6, not 6:30, and so on? That's a very, very common mistake. Uh, so you have to provide a reference point, you know. So it's much better to split the sentence into kind of several and say, uh, I, I woke up and looked at my watch. It was 6 a.m. I got dressed and went out into the deck. That's suddenly kind of, you can see some pictures from real life. As for the adjectives, well, someone said, one of my favorite Russian poets said that about sentimentality, that a poet should be a very experienced pharmacist and put only one or two drops of sentimentality into his poem. I would say the same about adjectives. So you have to uh, portion control them very, very thoroughly. And if you use two adjectives, which is not recommended, but well, sometimes you have to, then one of them should be kind of qualitative and the other quantitative. Yes, for example, uh, talking about the same Mount Essos and describing the monastery of Simona Petra. Uh, it was a 14th century skyscraper sitting on a tower-like rock high above the sea. The monastery's guest quarters were situated along the perimeter of the top of the monastery building. To get to the bathroom, one had to pass through a circular terrace clinging to the monastery walls. This frail wooden scaffolding, you see, frail is quantitative, and qualitative, basically. Wooden scaffolding was precariously suspended above the bottomless precipice. It shook under your feet like an unsteady ship deck during a sea storm. Through gaps between squeaky floorboards sagging under your feet, sharp black rocks licked by the foamy sea were clearly visible a good 100 meters below. In short, it was an ideal place for committing suicide, even if you didn't feel particularly suicidal. It was also ideal for deterring you from using the bathroom too often. So basically, sharp black rocks, that's another kind of example. You can use two adjectives, but if you look back at this description, you will see that it's mostly just one adjective, but you have to try to be as precise as possible with it. Uh, and now we come to something very, very important. It is basically your ability, or the writer's ability to see things properly. I mean, what do we mean to see? We all have eyes, and we all can see. Well, that's true, but most of us, unfortunately, overlook the most interesting bits, around us, of our existence. The first task I normally give to my students, of travel writing seminars, and they all come there prepared to fly to Antarctica, and to go to the exploring deserts and whatever. And I say, look, could you do me a little essay about your street, the street where you live? They said, what's the street where you live? It's bloody boring, there's nothing there. It's kind of council estate or whatever. I said, well, council estate is even better, because if you want to be a writer, you have to be able to see interesting things Otherwise, in seemingly uninteresting places. Just try and find something, open up your eyes, and after some resistance, those who agreed to do it, they get surprised. They come back and say, really, it's quite interesting, I looked at that building there and I found out who lived in it, and I suddenly paid attention of an unusual shape of the gables about, and it was really quite interesting. So there are examples in history and literature of even more kind of striking achievements of travelers, like French philosopher Blaise Pascal, for example. He famously was able to travel just in his bedroom, in his room, and wrote a book about it. I think it was him, if I'm not mistaken, yes. And another French philosopher, Voltaire, who once went on a trip to England, with all his servants and so on, but well, he didn't reach England, got stuck in Calais, and after a couple of nights in Calais, he said he doesn't need to go to England anymore because he has seen enough of England, as much of England as he wanted to see, because he was there in his imagination. He saw people arriving from there and so on. So it was enough for him. So basically, the point here is it's not the distance, good travel writing is not a category of distance. It's a category of observation, it is possible to travel in your own street. It is possible to travel in your own room. And at the time of lockdown, like we're experiencing now, this quality becomes even more important. You can all try to do it, and I guarantee you're going to discover some amazing stuff. Incidentally, I'm not sure whether my friend Alessandro is here from Italy, but he saw one of my latest features on Lecture's Garden City, the town where we live, in Geographical magazine, and well, which obviously I'm myself a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society, so it normally writes about places distant and hard to access. And he kind of texted me rather ironically, oh, that's what all travel writing came to now, basically write about the place where you live. It's kind of an easy way out. Well, it is and it is not. It's, well, I'm lucky to be living in the town, which is very interesting and unique, but well, try to write an essay about some less interesting town, like Grimsby, for example. I don't know why I just like the name, or Stevenage. I'm sure it can be a great work of literature, well, maybe a drama, tragedy, I don't know, or a thriller, maybe, rather than just a descriptive piece, but still, it's fascinating. So again, I'm reminded of the words of one of my favorite poets. I often quote poets because I like poetry. I actually started my career as a poet, and poetry is very good because it teaches you it's a good schooling for any writer, to be careful with words, to find the words properly and appropriately. So Boris Pasternak, he said about poetry that to find poetry, you don't need to climb high up in the mountains. You have to look down, bend down, and pick it up because it's in the grass under your feet. That's what poetry is. And I can say the same about, well, anything in literature, in writing, in travel writing, new impressions, interesting details. Yeah, they're there. They're under your feet. And I cannot tell you how important they are. It's one because if you get one detail right, it saves you pages and pages of unnecessary descriptions. I was still while in the Soviet Union, journalist. I was once in Moldavia, now called Moldova, and my host took me as a kind of a treat, really. It had nothing to do with my assignment, as a kind of a treat to the world's largest wine cellars in Novi Malesti, the cellars which are 250 kilometers long. They only use 50, but that's quite enough. So it's an amazing place with the lorries, going in both directions, the underground, and all this wine everywhere. Yeah, Brian, you're right. You can't drink too much wine. But anyway, so I went to the cellars, and I was escorted by well, a local winemaker there, and he was a kind of otherwise a remarkable guy with a ruddy face. But he has one interesting detail. On the bridge of his nose, there was a little scar, a corn of a wine glass. Because, and when I asked him what was, he said, well, that's a scar, a corner from a wine glass, because he tastes wine constantly. And when you taste the wine, the upper rim, the upper part of the rim of the glass touches your nose. And if you do it constantly, it results like a cone on your foot or whatever. So he had this scar. And basically, if you say, I was escorted by a local winemaker with the scar left by wine glass on the bridge of his nose. That's all you have. You don't have to say anything about this guy. Yes, he had a red face. He said he was suffering from wineism, disease of winemaker. But you can see red face, you don't need to describe his face, because a man with the cone of the glass on his nose cannot have any other face but red. So you can check. I don't know. It's pretty hard to find such people probably. So that's the importance and the strength of this one only correct detail, which is verse well, many words and paragraphs basically. Well, as I said, this I'm just trying to make it all rather concise, but I must mention one other things, and which is kind of probably the most dangerous trap for every writer, especially travel writer, is the danger of cliches, of tropes. I mean, it's very easy. I mean, if you read well, any kind of guidebook, particularly kind of Lonely Planet ones and so on, and when they try to describe something, it's all full of cliches, totally meaningless cliches. But what worries me even more is that thing that I mentioned already in the beginning, that many modern travel writers, or people who call themselves travel writers, they don't believe in the power of their vision and the power of their own observation. So, and they carry props with themselves, yeah. I kind of, I think this is totally unnecessary, and I actually hate this kind of attitude. Like, for example, the famous fridge around the island. Of course, you can make it funny. Take a fridge with you, take a piano with you, take any kind of elephant, but then, well, it will be a novel or a story about the fridge, carrying the fridge, not about Ireland and not about the country which you claim to be describing, because the reader will be distracted. It's this kind of elephant in the room, that is impossible to overlook. So you don't need props. The only thing you need is a pair of eyes, wide open eyes, and a lot of curiosity, a lot of vision. Okay, right, give the command to wind it up, which I will. So basically, well, you know what I mean. Just basically let go of your past, get lost, and open up your eyes. So that's the secret. And don't think about necessarily about putting it on paper. It will come. It will come. About the notes, for example. I mean, writers make different notes. I make very copious notes deliberately. I have horrible handwriting. Christine will confirm that. Absolutely unreadable. I can't read it myself. But, I almost do it deliberately, because when 2 years later, when I sit down to write that book, that feature, and try to decipher my own scribbles, and it's impossible. So I have to bring myself back in my imagination to that. I said, what was that? Oh, a house, a big house, kind of a house. And then suddenly, I get teleported back to that particular place 2 years ago. Memory is an amazing stuff. Yeah, like Bill Bryson, for example, he told me he doesn't make a lot of notes. He just makes, like, for example, he writes on one page, there's a big yellow building, or something like that. And that's it. And then he remembers it. And that's important as well, because this is like a beacon that kind of takes you back, that drags you back to the story which you research. Sometimes it happens, you have to write a story several months, if not years afterward. But again, I come back to Patrick Leigh Fermor, one of my favorite travel writers, and I was supposed to talk about my favorite travel writers, which I probably don't have time, but I can still do it if someone asks me to.
Vitaly,
yes,
I think it's time for some questions now.
sure.
We've got a few questions, and then
yeah,
perhaps,
I'm finishing. I'm just finishing my last sentence. Yeah.
Okay.
So about Patrick Leigh Fermor, because it wouldn't be respectful to him just to stop it halfway. Patrick Lefirma, and I think it's one of the probably best and biggest achievements in travel writing is these two books, that he wrote about walking in Europe 50 years after he actually did the walk, so he did the walk shortly before the war. He wrote it when he was already an old man living in Greece, and they're the most beautiful books you can imagine. All the details are fresh, and that's what memory does. That's what memory does. So we should all strive to that. And obviously, if someone is interested, I would be quite happy to talk about my my other favorite writers, travel writers, if you wish. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Vitaly. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions that have come up. And the first one I'm going to ask is from Clea Radcliffe. The hardest part of travel anywhere is that first step out of your front door. Any advice on making that first step easier, Vitaly?
Yeah, it's a very oriental question, I would say. It's an old kind of Chinese Tao. It's actually Zen proverb that a journey of many leagues starts with the first step. Very good question. By first step, I mean the difficulty not just of setting on a journey, but the difficulty of starting to write a piece. I wanted to touch upon it, be it a travel piece, be it a column, which I've written hundreds, if not thousands, be it a book. The hardest thing for me, at least, is this first step. So that's why people invented this in media res. You have to plunge and then it gets easier. But, the difficulty of making the first step is in direct proportion to the distance, of course, you have to cover, metaphorically speaking, or you can say in direct proportion to the amount of work, to the number of words you have to produce out of nothing. It's pretty hard to start a column. Every time I start a column, I agonize. I think, no, I'm not going to be able to do it this time. Now, so you've done hundreds of it out. No, but it was in the past. Now I can't do it. So you have really to take an effort. It is probably the main thing about being a writer. Ivan Bunin, the Nobel Prize winning Russian writer, he actually said that the main thing for a writer is to learn not to recoil from a clean sheet of paper, not to recoil. And you do recoil from it a lot. And in my life, when I was, well, I had a spell in Foxton, but my dear friend Angela is here. And I had kind of seemingly very little to do then, for all kinds of reasons. And I had to write a book. I had a contract. It took me 3 months to start. 3 months, every day I would kind of shilly-shally and dilly-dally and sit on my hands and have coffees and read a newspaper and then go for a walk. And then it's the end of the day, start tomorrow. And if I do, not 1,000 words a day, but, like 1,500 words, then I'll be still okay to meet the deadline and so on. It's mind-boggling. It's a torture, starting anything is a torture because you have to create something out of nothing. And it's always a very, very difficult thing. It concerns journeys, it concerns works of literature. Or anything artistic, I would say. Something out of nothing. It's not easy. Okay.
That's great. Now we've got a question from Laura Mitchell. As soon as you are allowed, where is the first place you would travel to?
As soon as that I'm allowed to travel, you mean? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I know where to, and I actually already want some people to send it. Well, first of all, we are going to Oily place. I must mention it. We are going to, with my lovely partner, Christine, we are going to start researching a book on British utopias. Well, so it's kind of internally in Britain on utopian settlements of Britain, which there are more than 4,000. And we live in one, which makes it easier. But also there are several, these new towns, and some of them are pretty horrible, like Milton Keynes and Stevenage and so on. Everything that was kind of created by good intentions, with which, as we know, the way to hell is paved. So this kind of books. We are going to travel around Britain, first of all, not far from home. But the first trip abroad probably will be to my favorite town in France called Montreuil-sur-Mer, which is not far from Calais. It's just absolutely beautiful, lovely place. I adore it and written about it. And Geographical wants me to write a magazine, wants me to write a large feature about it, spotlight feature. So I could write it without revisiting it, of course, but I think, you know, you never know, after the lockdown, things may have changed there. So that's what hopefully we are going to go in the end of May, maybe, if France opens up by then.
Okay. So we've got one final question before we go back to continue to your next section, Vitaly, which I believe starts off with avoiding props. But this question is from Dylan Scammell.
Oh, Dylan.
Yeah, you mentioned that being in lockdown really spurs travel when you get your freedom. At the end of this lockdown, what will you predict will happen to travel? Vaccine passports, new ways of traveling? Where would you recommend to go before the mass travel restarts?
Before the mass travel restarts. Well, no, that's absolutely obvious. To Venice. Well, I think I absolutely love Venice, and even had the temerity to write about it, which is not easy again because it's a lot of competition there. But what nearly ruined Venice, you know, and will keep doing so, and unfortunately, it's the number of people, the number of visitors there, the cruise ships. But my favorite time in Venice used to be January or kind of November when it got flooded. But now, even at those times of the year, it's still full of tourists, you know. So it now must be complete heaven. Well, COVID-infected heaven, but still heaven. And actually, a friend of mine, who, well, I can call him a publisher of mine as well, Thomas Jongleur, he's just releasing a book, Empty Venice. So he was quite quick, you know, to react to that. There should be amazing photos, you know, the amazing photos. What is going to happen to travel in general? God knows, really. I mean, it depends whether we are going to get rid of the virus completely, or it's going to be still with us. But of course, people are going to be more cautious. But on the other hand, remember the depressed spring, you know, the spirit of contradiction. The more you try to stop people from traveling, the more they probably will travel, you know. And again, I kind of repeat myself. If you want to make someone in travel, lock him up for a couple of months, not for a year. We've been locked up for too long. But now when the doors get flung open, I think we all rush out and all start traveling, either in our cities and towns or abroad, probably not in our bedrooms this time, because we had enough of them.
Okay, Vitaly. So we have another 10 minutes now, and
How about the competition?
And then we'll take some more questions and announce the winner of the competition.
Okay. Because sorry, I kind of misunderstood you a little bit. I thought I had to wind up the whole thing when you said well before the break, but that's okay. I can I can talk forever. So it's not a problem at all. And I'll tell you a little bit about this book. And I don't want you to get an impression that it's a kind of a megalomaniac kind of attempt to sum something up or whatever. Well, I was saying to Christine the other day, I could probably put together another book like that quite easily, if needed, 650 pages. But as I said, it's probably much less than half, you know. And I try to pick up the best stories, you know, from my point of view, and to make the scope quite wide. So it's basically all 5 continents, you know. But quite a lot of stories here, they come from close to home, and I'm very proud of it. Quite a lot of them are from Scotland, where I lived and worked for several years, you know, worked for the Glasgow Herald and traveled all over the place. quite a lot of them are about Ireland, where I also lived and worked, where I met Dylan, one of the guests that day. And there's something about him in my book, Vitaly's Island. And I think I used the extract here as well about Dublin. I think I mentioned Dylan in it too. And there is, for example, a section about islands. I love islands. Well, there may be an explanation to that. Again, I didn't tell you, but I forgot to tell you that my life was quite interesting in this respect, because I spent the first 3 years of my life in a very interesting place called the secret town, a secret Soviet town. My parents were both scientists. My mother was actually a chemical engineer, but my father was a particle physicist. And they were young after the university, straight. They were sent to work in this city near Moscow, which was behind 40,000 people, behind the concrete wall, with a barbed wire where you couldn't leave it or enter it, of course, without a special pass, and it had quite nice shops there, from what people are telling me, my parents, because I was very small. They took me out of that place when I was 3 years old. I don't really remember a lot about it, but when I was in America, New Mexico, they have an atomic museum there not so long ago. And I spent actually 11 months traveling in America using Greyhound coaches mostly. And it claimed to have the map of all the secret towns of the USSR, and there were dozens of them. But it didn't have that particular town where I grew up. And I came up to the director and I said, your map is not complete. And they said, how do you know? I said, I know because I lived in one of the towns and it's not there. They actually corrected the mistake. I asked my mother to write some kind of memoir. She was still alive then, about her time there. This beautiful piece of memoirs. It's in the book as well. And I sent it to the director of that museum in Albuquerque, and they corrected the map. So, but what I'm basically driving at is that someone who spent the first 3 years of his life in a closed environment like that, and you may not even be aware of it very much. I remember some kind of strange, images and phantoms from those times. It cannot fail but make an imprint on your life, I mean, any child psychologist or other psychologist will explain it much better, but there is this kind of thing about escaping, with me. I mean, I'm thinking of starting a website, The Man Who Escapes, writing about my travels. For me, every travel is a kind of an escape. And it's not necessarily an escape from something, unpleasant and bad, but it's a change of scenery. It's in my blood. So, as I said, I wouldn't recommend anyone to spend any time of their lives in a town like that, but it kind of helped me to become what I am, and it's more or less logical, I think, what happened. So, as I said, there's quite a good selection here. There are some, quite a number of pieces here that haven't been previously published, plus my essay about the travel writing in the very end, the kind of tips and secrets, if any, of travel writing. But I got, just in case, I thought if I had some time left, if I can find it. Do I have about 10 minutes still? Because I could read a little piece, the whole piece, which is not in the book.
Vitaly, you could, are you doing the final section on avoiding props and your favorite travel writers?
Yeah, I've done the thing about avoiding props already. My favorite travel writers, yeah, actually, yeah, I would rather talk about that maybe than reading you that extract, because reading, especially on Zoom, doesn't really work very well, probably. It is a piece about Las Vegas, though, and which I really simply forgot to include, but there are lots of other pieces that I forgot to include. So maybe if I have this one day, God permitting and COVID permitting, the bumper book number 2, I will definitely include that. Yeah, as for my favorite travel writers, you can say maybe writers in general. Well, I already mentioned a couple of them, yeah, and obviously it's Patrick Lee Firma. Well, I already told you a little bit about him. His amazing memory, this amazing intuition, you know, power of detail, just second to none. A beautiful stylist as well. I never met him, unfortunately, and he passed away in Greece already not so long ago. A friend of mine, a producer of Radio 4, and I did quite a lot for BBC Radio 4, including presenting a travel program. We actually went to Greece at some point and met him, you know, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, John Humphreys, you know, the presenter, former presenter of one of the of Today program on Radio 4. He now lives, he bought this house in this house that was formerly belonged to Patrick Lee Firma. He loved Greece. Well, Bill Bryson I already mentioned. Yeah, I think he's well, he might not be, you know, very kind of profound in what he writes about. It is very funny, and he's got very good eye for detail. And I, as I said, used to know him quite well. We traveled a little bit together in Tasmania, and then when I came to visit him in Hanover, where we were recording Radio 4 program there, basically I was teaching him how to ski, which was not very easy because he couldn't really ski at all, you know, and it was quite a funny kind of piece of radio in the end. And we were about to do something else with him, you know, but another movie, but somehow it didn't happen. Very good writer as well, a travel writer. What else? I mean, for example, well, of course I can talk about Dickens and Mark Twain. Mark Twain is amazing, you know. He's so, again, I'm not calling him travel writer because he's so much more than that, but I have the full collection of his books about Europe, of his travel books, Innocent Abroad, Innocent at Home, and Following the Equator, and so on. They're absolutely brilliant books. They're well ahead of their time, you know. They're very modern. He uses some Americanisms that are sometimes hard to understand, but otherwise they're very modern. And for example, I always admire his metaphors, like he writes about the departure of the first package tour at some point from America to Europe. It's probably Thomas Cook's tour, it was, and the people standing on the deck, you know, of the departing vessel. So they wave to the people on the shore, and the people on the shore wave to the people on the deck. And then there is this magical sentence: the flag on the mast of the ship wanted to wave but failed. I think it's an absolute magic, because obviously he could have said the flag was slightly stirred by the wind, you know, but my God, you know, how much better is what he did, you know, this kind of hyperbolic, I would say, metaphor. The flag wanted to wave but failed, and you immediately see this flag kind of waving slightly. That was Mark Twain. My favorite tandem of Russian writers, Ilf and Petrov, Russian satirists who both died very young, and wrote two very funny books, The 12 Chairs and The Little Golden Calf. And I'm very proud to have won the Golden Calf Award while still in Russia for satirical journalism, and Ilf and Petrov Award as well, actually. So I still read them and reread them. They're all available in English translations. I can't recommend them strongly enough. The funniest books you'll ever read. They wrote a great book about America called, well, in translation from Russian, it was called Little Golden America, although its real title in Russian was One Storied America. But you have to bear in mind that it was still before the Second World War, after Great Depression. So America had censorship, quite strict censorship then. So they decided that One Storied America was not patriotic enough, probably. So they changed it to echo their other novel, Little Golden Calf and Little Golden America. It's an absolutely brilliant travel book, probably one of the best I've ever seen. And it's very modern, despite being written like 80 years ago, you know. It tells you a lot about America and what I did. Again, you have lots of failed kind of, not failed, but partially completed works, you know, in writer's life. I went to the States, spent 11 months there writing a column for the Daily Telegraph and researching a book following in the footsteps of Wilson Petrov in 1935, 1936 when they visited it. And I got enough material. And then I came back to the UK, and then 9/11 happened. And my son Dmitry remembers it very well because we were both in Amsterdam then. And when 9/11 happened, of course, you know, I felt emotionally unable to do a kind of a funny, even if maybe, you know, kind of revealing a whole pretty book about the United States. So I had to do something else. And then with time, as it often happens, you know, I got distracted and the book never happened. But in my bumper book, I used quite a lot of stuff from it, following in the footsteps of Wilson Petrov. And well, basically, I think it works quite well. Also, yeah, I'm talking not about my book, but about my favorite travel writers. But because I remember another thing, you know, I was researching a book about Italy for quite some time, and which again didn't happen. It's normal, you know. It's in my other book, Life as a Literary Device, I compared the certain books they are destined to be written, and other books are destined to be unwritten. You know, I compare them with kind of fetuses, you know, that can be, some of them well, can miscarry, some of them can can be aborted sometimes. Like my American book probably was aborted. The Italian book that I'm talking about was probably miscarried, you know, because there was no kind of outside reasons for it not to happen. It just, you know, I got distracted by something else. But again, a big extract from it. It's looking for a bad meal in Italy, basically. I think it's quite funny. You can find in this bumper book. Well, other favorite travel writers. Robert Byron, of course. Yeah, must mention Robert Byron. Again, I think he should be much better known that he is. He was a rather posh kind of, I may say so, youngster. Why youngster? Because he actually died very young. He studied in Oxford, and he wrote his first travel book about Europe, traveling with his two kind of mates around Europe in a car, you know, in 1929, I think. So, and then he actually, he died when he was, I think, either 31 or 35. It was during the war, but it had nothing to do with warfare. I think the ship he was on was basically, yeah, that's something to do with warfare, because it was, it stumbled upon a mine, basically, a German mine, and everyone died there. But he wrote several absolutely amazing books. First Russia, then Tibet, The Road to Oxiana, and my favorite one, The Station, which is quite rare. I have its first edition, probably the most valuable book in my collection. It's about Mount Essos, and Mount Essos is one of my favorite places in the world. You know, the place that I kind of very much discovered for myself and hopefully for my readers, that all-male Republic of Monks. Yeah, I have a couple of discoveries I'm kind of proud of. So, and this is one of them. The other one is discovering a country called Seborga, which again, it's a different story, but it's a little village on the border of France and Italy, where the local flower farmer remembered that it used to be an independent principality in the days of the war, and he actually proclaimed it independent again and proclaimed himself the prince. And I visited it actually with Dmitry, who was quite small. Then we spent the day with this absolutely insane prince, you know, was drinking in one of the two restaurants, you know, of that village, and he would refuse to pay, of course, because he said, I'm a prince, princes don't pay. He had his own army of 5, you know, and it's 300 people. So it was all quite quirky and eccentric, and I came back and wrote a piece about this country, this village, for the Spectator magazine, and then I had a call from the first interactive atlas. Was then in the internet was just kind of maturing then, and they said they wanted to put this country on the map. You know, they asked me for some details. I'm very proud of, and it's still it is on maps. It's still not, of course, officially recognized, but they mint their own coins now, and Georgia, the first the prince, he passed away. His son was the prince for some time, and now they have a lady, which is a commoner, that doesn't come from the flower farmers family, just one of the villages in that village. It's a very quirky place. Tourists love it, But yeah, so I was one of the founding fathers of the place. A very funny place. It's in my book, Passport to Enclave. Sorry, Little is the Light. You can read about it. That's talking about my discovery. Sorry, I kind of changed subject slightly, but I think it's important to have your own little discoveries. You don't necessarily have to discover an island or a country, but you can discover something for yourself, something inside yourself here, because the best travel writing, and it's not I who said that, is always based around the author. It's not even, it's all important what I said, noticing things and having an eye for detail, but it is always based around you. Again, my favorite writer, whom I must mention, and travel writer as well, he was Konstantin Paustovsky. The best book probably ever is his The Story of a Life, 6 volumes, beautiful book. He said, no matter what you write about, always write about yourself. And by that, he didn't mean, become an egomaniac. He meant that we actually, the only thing we know in this world, is ourselves. Most writers, if you think about it, whether they write fiction, non-fiction, travel books about distant countries or not so distant countries, they are there. Patrick Lefevre is always there in his book. Robert Byron, is always there. Konstantin Paustovsky, is always there as well. You can see him as if you are talking to him. So, and he also, it was him, Paustovsky, who said another beautiful thing, and that probably I would like to finish on that quote. He said, if we are given a doubtful happiness of being born, doubtful happiness, we must at least see the world. I read it when I was probably 11 years old or 12 years old, and I was guided by it since then, and I did everything to be able to do it, because reading it when you were a Soviet little boy, armchair travel at 11, it was an absolute impossibility, but I decided I need to struggle for it, and I need to try and achieve it, and I did. And I wish you the same.
Oh, thank you, Vitaly. That was fantastic. And we are now going to go to, if you look on the screen, I think you can see.
Yes, I can see.
Yeah. I tried to print it out, Vitaly, but I couldn't get the printer to work upstairs.
No, it's okay.
So well, are you all right with that?
No, I look at the first sentence. The dinosaur one is plagiarism. I don't know if you wrote it. When he woke up, the dinosaur was no longer there. Yeah, that's what I quoted. So I discard this. That one, number 2, I don't quite understand. It's a bit graphic. What do you think, Dmitry? Did you have a look? Because
yeah, it's quite a few to look through. I also shared all the responses in the chat as a file that all of you can download.
Yeah, because I can't see them now, and I probably shouldn't look at them now. How about we have a look at it quietly, because otherwise it will be after the webinar. And do you have the sources of all the sentences? Yeah.
No, we don't have the sources, but we can write and find out who wrote the winning line after the webinar.
Yeah, that becomes a kind of a competition in itself. You compete another competition on top of this one. Yeah, because I really need to look at it carefully and properly, and then someone else will have to entertain you while I'm doing so, and I'm not sure we can do that. So we'll give you an answer within a week. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah, and.
Okay. Do you want to answer some of the other questions, Vitaly?
If you have time, yeah, because I can't see. I can't see. I
well,
can
there's
see
actually.
now.
Okay. So, well, one of them was from Brian Burgess, which is, have you thought of a career in marriage guidance?
In what? Marriage guidance?
guidance.
Well, well, it's a compliment to you. Yes, marriage guidance.
Yeah.
Well, it's a compliment to yourself then.
And then let's see, and then Anthony Peake actually said his Greek publisher is interested in him writing a personal account of his travels in Greece over the last 45 years. Your advice is priceless. Thank you so much.
Oh, Tony, you're too kind. Tony is actually an absolutely excellent writer, and I said it to you, Christine, yesterday. Remember, you're talking, and I'm not saying it just because he is here, and he's one of my most admired writers, actually, although his subject is slightly different, subject matter, you know, I would say. Yeah, it's about, well, how would you define it yourself, Tony?
I think he might have gone now, because he's said, I enjoyed this so much, yeah.
Okay, well, then let's criticize him. Anyway, no, he's a very interesting writer, Anthony Peake. Probably published as many books as I did, maybe even more. Now, anything else?
And that's as far as questions. Frank McMullen says, thank you all very much. A real pleasure to journey with you this afternoon.
Well, that's nice. I mean, and as I said, this is the first of 5 here. And yes. We'll get into some other subjects soon. And yeah, do come back if you wish. And again, you're free to buy, unless you're a winner, of course, then you don't need to buy the book. But if you're not a winner, you're free to buy the book or not to buy the book. So, but if you enjoyed this conversation, I hope you enjoyed the book even more.
And the next webinar will be on March the 28th, and that will be Hidden Corners of Europe, Enclaves, Mini-States and Micronations. So please do tell your friends and family about this and sign up for it. It's a lovely way to get through your Sundays while we go through, hopefully, the end of lockdown. Goodness knows what's going to happen. By the time we finish the webinars, Vitaly, there might be a different world out there.
Hopefully, yes. Yeah, gosh, touch wood. Touch wood.
Yeah, we're at the end of the webinar, but I would invite you, if you want to say hello to Vitaly or Christine, to unmute yourselves, switch on your cameras, and we can have a bit more of a group.
I have a gallery view now. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jerry. Yeah, most people are muted, I can see. But they can unmute themselves if they want to. Well, if they don't, that's fine.
Yes.
Maybe they're just digesting what I said. It's so profound, you know. That there's nothing much to add. Yoko.
Hey.
So did actually.
Vitaly, thank you, Christine.
Oh, thanks, Yoko. Oh, it's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see everyone.
It? Yeah.
When people started leaving already. How many there were when we started, actually, Dmitry?
We were about 30 people.
30, okay. Oh, well. Yeah, many people, I don't know. Many more people registered, but some registered for the subsequent webinars, because I think some may have heard this particular talk that I did today already, because I did it recently online for our settlement and lectures here. So I actually told them that there will be repetitions. Yeah.
Thanks, Vitaly. It was lovely to see you again.
Angela, lovely to see you too.
To hear you, yeah, and Christine too. So.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
We'll come and visit you soon.
Yeah, you must do that. when you're going
Absolutely.
over to France, yeah.
On the way to
just on the way.
Montreux. On the way to
Yes.
Montreux, probably we will.
Absolutely,
Yes.
yes.
There you go.
Anyway,
That
as
would be lovely.
soon as you can. Great to see you. Okay.
You look great, by the way. Oops.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll leave it out with the slideshow, and feel free to jump off whenever you like.
Oh,
Katya.
Katya. Привет.
Здравствуйте, спасибо вам.
It's a pleasure. Long time no see. Oh, that's a gorgeous child. The lovely.
My little Nina.
Oh, we have fireworks outside. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
I know. Oh, that's a good. Oh, they're lovely, actually.
I ordered that especially.
Yeah, it ends officially now. Fireworks.
For my talk for the end of
amazing.
February, maybe for the end of
They're
winter.
beautiful.
What's the occasion?
Your webinar, the first one, it's kicking it off.
Okay. Oh, you arranged it.
And that everybody was Vitaly's first.
Excellent. Oh, well, thanks for arranging that, Tisha.
Yeah,
So,
we had a word with some people, you know.
so this is, yeah, well, anyway.
Okay.
I could explain what's on photos. I forgot to mention Illy Place, which I was planning to, but it's okay. Actually, it will be very relevant in the next webinar about enclaves and other stuff. Natasha is going to be scared, you know, now.
I know.
Yeah.
Did you see, oh, Dave and Lou said, thanks so much. It's been fantastic. Jerry Miller said, Vitaly, it was a brilliant book. Thank you very much. Dylan said, enjoyed this conversation on March the 28th. Now time to look into a Venice flight. Happy Sunday to all of you. Thanks, Dimitri, Christine, for your work to put this special event together. Bye for now.
And there's Anton as well. Who is
Anton,
Anton? Who is Mitya?
Anton is my colleague
Oh,
and
nice.
friend.
Is Russian?
Yeah, very much so. He's the one who travels Europe and Asia with his family
Oh.
from St. Petersburg to Beijing.
Oh, no, yeah, you mentioned him. Yeah, absolutely. So, and his wife, привет,
Oh,
Anton.
Anton.
I'm about to go outside to build my RV for traveling around the world.
Is it his wife that was asking about how to write about the impressions, yeah, or something?
Yeah,
Is
Polina is,
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, as I said, just travel. Forget about putting it on paper. It will come. That's
Yeah.
my advice. Just
Yeah,
get as many
interesting.
impressions as possible.
we're interested in sort of combined media, video and writing.
Good luck.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, cheers. Come to the next one.
Okay, I will finish the meeting, and thank you, everybody.
And where is Mitya Malinsky? It's still there.
Yeah.
Want to see him say hi. He should have brought his dad.
Hey,
Oh,
Alexander.
Alexandra.
Ah, that's another.
Outbuilding
That's a different Alexandra.
yeah,
Yeah, there were another Alessandro.
you're mute, Alexander.
And my Alessandro didn't turn up, did he? Because he signed up. You know, I'm still thinking that maybe some people were unable to sign up for some reason.
Maybe.
Yeah.
How's the weather, Mr. Toshet?
It's melty. Like where Charlie's working on a dam. It's like working on the gutter, like trying to flood the surroundings. Yeah,
Snow
that's
is
a
melting
project.
in Montreal.
Yeah, it's melting. Yeah. Well, I missed some of it, but I got quite a bit. Thanks a lot. It was very nice.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like busy watching Charlie as we were like tobogganing with the neighbors and stuff, but I was thinking about the sentence, you know, spinning it in my head. How could I start? That was a
Well,
great motivation.
if you think of something, you know, well, later post factum, you know, send it on to Dmitry and we'll consider it.
Yeah. Okay. Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, because it's not over. There's no winner yet.
No, because I
No.
just said I need to look at it properly,
Oh,
and
okay.
we'll let you know.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Alex.
Yeah.
Who is Councillor Radcliffe? That's
No,
probably.
I think they're probably just hanging on without
Okay.
necessarily being in the one. Let's end the webinar now, and thanks everybody.
Bye bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.